what are the implications for a financial brand, a bank, a
Mhm.
community bank, even a credit union to be considering? Because if I think about the last run up, what was it, like 2020, 2021 time period,
Mhm.
particularly on the Bitcoin side, but you saw it in all the different coins. And like you said, what is it, like 30,000 coins at this point?
Right.
It's mind boggling. I've got a two-part question, and I want to come back to the coins because there are so many different coins. Everyone hears typically Bitcoin, Ethereum. Why is it important to not know every single one, but what does that mean for those watching or listening who they've heard Bitcoin, they've heard Ethereum, but what does that actually really mean?
Yeah, I also kind of compare it to all of the different forms of currency around the world currently. I mean, a good way to think, it's like, okay, we have the dollar, yen, you have euro, all beholden to a particular country, but you also have these projects that serve very different purposes as well. I wouldn't necessarily categorize myself as a Bitcoin maximalist, but Bitcoin is the OG. It's the gold standard, pun intended, in some sense. And there are many that forked the code, the underlying code for Bitcoin to make the next Bitcoin the next Bitcoin, whatever that means. Unless and until I see that, I don't find a reason to have anything that is the next Bitcoin. You have Bitcoin, and then you have choices to make about other things. Obviously, coming from the decentralized finance space as well, I understand and appreciate very much that there are projects that use tokens, either one to fund, be careful with that, but also two that have many other reasons besides the purpose that Satoshi laid out for Bitcoin that serve interesting purposes as well. It also makes me think of the first use case for Web 2.0, for example, was electronic mail, which we almost never open now.
Yeah,
And look at all the cool things that we're doing, the amazing transformative things that we're doing with the internet that we couldn't have contemplated when Brian Gumble and Katie Couric were talking about what is electronic mail and let's get an intern in here
that's
to
right.
figure it out, right? You remember that?
What's the at sign? I actually
Yeah, right.
I've showed that at some planning sessions because it, like, how quickly we forget how far we've come in really a relatively short period of
Absolutely.
time.
Absolutely. So it's important to spend some time. This is the ethos and the spirit of the crypto economy also comes from financial privacy, autonomy, self-sufficiency, self-determination. It's a lot of power in that, but also a lot of
Sure.
responsibility to not abdicate our individual responsibility to someone else to not worry our pretty little heads about the details. No, the power is in the details. And so that calls us to at least figure out what's the difference between, and the point of the difference between Bitcoin, ETH, obviously, like, XRP, you
Mm-hmm.
got the meme coins, you have stables, you
Dogecoin,
have
yeah.
central bank digital currencies. This is the language of the future of money, of the future of work, of the future of wealth. It will become increasingly important with more space economy exploration. Like, what would be the economy in space?
Right.
Are we still going to be beholden to particular countries, or we have something more global? What would be the global and universal reserve? These are the reasons that we have to figure this out. Not all 30,000, right? But start where you are and definitely start with the ones that have the greatest historical timeline that you can look back to January of 2009 and says, okay, this has some staying power. What's this about?
It's interesting because you go back to 2009, so that's 15 years from kind of the birth of the internet, or at least internet reaching mass consciousness of humanity. And the Katie Couric, Brian Go, that's a fantastic, at this point, kind of meme looking back. Then 2013 was when Ethereum came up. Now you've got, and this is, I think, the intersection of intellectual property, smart contracts. Connect those dots back to the coin. What does that mean? How does the smart contracts play into the coins themselves as
Mm-hmm.
a store of value or value exchange? And I've got a follow up to this in a minute, of where I think we'll probably see an increase value here
Hmm.
As we move further into the age of AI, particularly around things like deep fakes and authentication. So
Hmm.
where where do the smart contracts play into this idea of cryptocurrency?
Yeah, this is interesting, particularly when you think about um, decentralized protocols, or those base layers, those layer one solutions that will allow for the internet to perform like a supercomputer, and for people to then monetize or not on top of the build on top of that infrastructure to automate certain if then functions.
Mm-hmm.
Right. As a lawyer, when I hear contract, I thought of something completely different than the automated performance that little bits of code can do and enable, to remove a lot of the friction of things that, we were paying people a rent-seeking premium to do. I have no fear that lawyers will be replaced. Great. There's a lot of things that I had to babysit and do, and people were paying me hundreds of dollars to do that I didn't want to do, wasn't the best at doing, and I shouldn't be involved. Like, let me do the it depends work, but let's automate the if then sequence, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now when I think of smart contracts and that rudimentary example that we tend to use, like a vending machine, if I want a soda, I have $2 and it's $1.50. I don't need anybody to be there to, God willing, let the soda drop and give me my 50 cents change, and I'll be on my way. And then you extrapolate that into some really important and sophisticated things as a matter of decentralized finance, to truly be your own bank, to truly leverage your own crypto assets and pull out value in the same way you might pull out equity in a home.
Right.
That's really powerful stuff. And that's some of the stuff that we will see: smart contracts and also wallet addresses leading to identity.
Yeah, and that idea of identity comes back to, you know, you have your identity in the physical world, but then you have your
Mm,
identity in the digital world, which is becoming increasingly under potential threat with the rise of AI, deep fakes. I mean, you're seeing headlines now, celebrities getting deep fake to promote product through
right.
social media. And where might digital money play a way to authenticate who a person really is? And it might not necessarily be digital money, but it might be
Hmm.
the blockchain layer behind all of it that plays a role here. What am I
Yeah.
missing with this?
Yeah, you're spot on with respect to the underlying technology. And what I alluded to a bit ago about, right now we are focused on wallet addresses, this alphanumeric um, chain
Mhm.
that uniquely identifies the holder of a particular cryptocurrency. But the idea of going beyond that, not just in the fungible token space, but also getting back to your earlier point of a non-fungible token, which becomes this unique identifier with some type of metadata that points to what right now we're focused on, maybe creativity or experience, but also could uniquely and pseudonymously point to a particular person.
Mm.
I think that's going to be the ultimate flex. That's when we get there, and I think we're going to have to get there sooner than later, given the impact of machine learning, artificial intelligence, deep fakes, everything that you've mentioned before. That is a huge and pressing concern, that this novel combination of existing technology of cryptography, consensus, internet, peer-to-peer, has placed us in the position to do some really exciting things, not even just for currency, but for identity, which brings safety and all sorts of really important benefits.
Well, that idea of crypto, and you move it into the NFT, or the non fungible token space.
Mm-hmm.
You've got that whole narrative that was being shaped by, you know, intangible assets going for millions and
Mm-hmm.
millions and millions of dollars. I mean, who was leading the way with that? Bored Ape, for
Yeah,
example,
for sure.
was kind of the rise out of that narrative. but it's
And the
very,
punks.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. It's very hard though for someone to understand, well, why would someone quote unquote invest in an intangible asset that they don't own, but that's where I think ownership, coming back to the point of your legal background, how does ownership play into this? Because there is ownership here. It's just not physical.
Right. Right. Because we have to, some of the comparisons I use to at least get people to appreciate what the non-fungible token is, which is an asset in its own right, but really pointing to and connecting the evidence of ownership, or at least a connection to some person, place, thing.
Correct.
Right. And so the best way to, even at a high level, understand that connection is to think of the deed to a house versus a house.
Yep.
And yes, I could drive down the street and take a picture of a house. I could frame the picture of the house. I could hang that picture in my house. Maybe I could even sell that as well, but I don't own the house.
Correct.
And if I'm fine with that, that's fine as well. Or, but the deed is my ability to exercise kind of dominion, control, or the connection
Yep.
to this other asset. And the same can be true. And then when we think of intellectual property, I start off all of my IP surveys say, we're talking about not physical, but actual property that is created with the mind that we evidence in some physical or tangible form. But the copyright is not the copyrighted creative or artistic content. The copyright is the state given rights to exclusive rights over this property for a certain period of time. And it's also those property rights are created by government as well. So I think once people start to unpack what that means, then it makes it easier to make the connection of this next intellectual leap, I think.
That right there is that next thing. It's like, where are we going from here? Is that future focus? Because if we think back to 2020, 21, I know there are a lot of community financial brands that were caught off guard. They were unaware of the deposit loss from moving deposit assets out of their quote unquote dominion control, to use your words, into the crypto market, whether that be Bitcoin was the big one or any of the other coins. They weren't even aware. And I'm like, well, go look at your transactions. How much was moving from you to, say, just a Coinbase, for example? And then it's kind of quieted down. Like it has not been a big point of conversation over the past couple of years, but I think that was just the tip of the iceberg. It was the first iteration, and it's going to come back. Now's kind of a bit of a lull. What should a community institution be thinking about going forwards into the future when it comes to digital money? Where are the opportunities that they could be aware of to continue to create value for their members or for their account holders?
This is such an important time in any down market. I feel like this is my third, because things get quiet. We talk about people building because you're not chasing price action. People are kind of licking their wounds and reorganizing. From the investor point of view, folks are kind of repositioning themselves. This is the best time for business leaders, for brands to learn without the FOMO pressure of, on the pure investor side. We spend so much time talking about the investor side. It's important. Personally, I am invested in the market. Professionally, I have earned different types of cryptocurrencies in my tenure. But the best and biggest and most impactful relationship that I've had with the future of the digital economy is my professional pivot. My ability kind of in this, I know I look very young, but on the inside, I'm quite old. I'm a Forbes over 50 listee. And so kind of like at this mid-level of my career, how do you remain relevant in a world that changes not in decades, not in years, in many instances, hashtag AI, not even in months. And AI has been around a long time, but coming in to your earlier point of public consciousness, the risk that business leaders are subjecting themselves, their C-suite, their workforce, and their relationships with partners, and their ability to be viable in the future is created right now. It harkens back to that pivotal moment between, blockbusters or Netflix. Like,
Right.
which set are you repping, as the young folks would say? Where are you going to fall? And we don't have the luxury of time.
Mm-mm.
We don't have the luxury of time to wait for legal to come down the hall and tell us it's okay now,
Yeah.
because it's a both and scenario where learning and positioning yourself, because we're still relatively early, not even relatively early, we're still early. This is the opportunity to learn so that you can lead.
As we wrap up, I want to give people some context here. Alvin Toffler in the 1970s wrote, "The illiterate of the 21st century will not be those who cannot read and write, but it'll be those who cannot learn, unlearn, and relearn." And I think right now is a great unlearning, relearning opportunity.